I'm Commander Shepard, and Mike Dodd is my favorite bird-like hybrid on the Citadel. And This Week in Geek is my favorite podcast on the Citadel. And you're listening to ThisWeekInGeek.net.
And now it's time for another special feature.
Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to ThisWeekInGeek.net. I'm your host, Mike the Birdman Dodd, and yet again, we are here in quarantine. It's yet another lovely day in paradise, surrounded by four walls, or in my case, a library, a hermetic library, if you will. And we have done some interviews over the past couple of weeks with people from the RPG industry. We've talked to people like Nicole Lindros, though I don't know whether that interview has yet gone live. We've talked with Aaron Paulier, and we're hoping to do more interviews as time moves forward. So I reached out to a friend of mine who was an active LARPer for a number of years, and they suggested I reach into one of my old favorite role-playing worlds, and that is World of Darkness, done by White Wolf. And I said to them, well, what is the game we should talk about? And they said Mage, the Ascension. And I was like, I don't know anything about that. Oh shit. Because that is one of the White Wolf worlds that I never had a chance to play growing up. I played Vampire. I read a lot of Werewolf because I'm First Nations Canadian, and I just thought it was very fascinating. I read Hunter, The Reckoning, because I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I just thought it was really cool. But Mage always intimidated me because it dealt with, well, scary magics and all sorts of cool things that could warp reality. But there are also people in Mage that could make like lightning guns. So you could put like Nikola Tesla to shame by creating these awesome weapons out of nothing. Or you could make a guy trip and fall down a thing of stairs. You could change luck and probability and all sorts of neat things. But I never played it. I was so intimidated by it that I avoided it. So when my friend said, why don't you talk to a guy who was heavily involved in it and pretty much AKA wrote the book on it, I was like, oh man, this is a chance for me to learn about Mage from a guy who I've learned is essentially part of the Council of Nine Traditions. I am so excited to talk to Phil Satyros Brucato. He has worked upon multiple White Wolf books. He did stuff for Onyx Path for the Mage 20th anniversary release, done countless other books. And according to him, his Wikipedia is sadly out of date. So doing some of this was a little bit rushed, but I am more than excited to welcome Satyros Brucato, Phil, to the program. Welcome to ThisWeekInGeek.net.
Really appreciate it.
I am excited to talk with you because, as I mentioned, I love old White Wolf. I love the idea of the World of Darkness because growing up in the mid-90s, everybody who wanted to try something that wasn't D&D or wasn't Shadowrun wanted something a little bit different. And the World of Darkness offered that dark gothic side of role-playing. It offered a dark reflection of our reality, and there were so many different games in there built upon their D10 system, and they all functioned together with a meta plot that eventually culminated in the Time of Judgment, which I still think is one of the coolest things gaming has ever done. So seeing all these worlds come together and work together, I think, was something tremendously special. So I guess where we begin at the beginning is, how did you get in? Like, what were some of your earliest gaming experiences, and how did you eventually get involved with White Wolf in the old World of Darkness? Because I have a feeling there's probably a tale to tell here that not a lot of people know about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the short version of the very long story is that my dad, who is also Phil Brucato, is very influential to me in a lot of ways. And one of those ways is that he is a big fantasy fan. So I grew up on Lord of the Rings and Edgar Allan Poe and horror movies and Tarzan and like the Lord of the Rings and so forth. And so when he and my mom's, well, actually going back a little bit more, comic books also. When I was a kid, I used to love to tell all kinds of action adventure stories and things, but I'm dyslexic, so I had a very hard time writing these things down. And I was, I was a very insular kid and didn't really know, wasn't really good at interacting with people. Suspect in retrospect that I may have been on the lighter end of the autistic spectrum, but don't have a formal diagnosis for that. Just if you analyzed me at age 10, I would, these days by current diagnostic criteria, I would probably apply. But in any case, when Dad and Mom split when I was 14, I moved in with my dad for a little while, and because I didn't have any friends out there, I spent a lot of time hanging around the local malls. And that's when I saw AD&D books and all of these miniatures, Heritage and Grenadier and Ralph Partha miniatures on spinner racks. Now, I've been really, really into models and toy soldiers and so forth, but when I saw those, I was like, oh, cool. Well, being 14, I couldn't afford these things, so my first adventure in game design was making up these rules for having Siege of Minas Tirith sort of battles and adventures with these cool miniatures that I saw and couldn't afford. And then I asked for those for Christmas, and for Christmas 1979, I got the Monster Manual and the old blue book and a bunch of miniatures. So me and my friend Chris Gibbon started playing immediately and started screwing it up immediately, but we really, really loved it. So through high school, we were two, and then eventually five, of the few people we knew who'd even heard of Dungeons and Dragons, much less played it. Around that same time, I also got involved in theater. Started doing theater in 1980, my sophomore year of high school. Actually, got involved in drama class my freshman year of high school, started actually being in plays and working on plays my sophomore year, and also got really into heavy metal and punk around the same time. So all those things kind of converged to give me basically a toolkit for interacting with people and telling the stories that I'd had in my head. And so by the time I graduated, when I went into high school, I was this really bookish, quiet, incredibly insecure kid with a wild imagination. When I graduated, I was one of the high school drama stars. I was doing community theater, film. I was a political activist and DJ. Had started to learn how to play bass guitar, and had been gaming for 4 years at that point, and immediately got involved in a medieval recreation LARP after I graduated high school, and so just kind of ran with it. So my freshman year of college, again, fall of 1983, I majored in theater in college. And my friends Chris Hancock and Kathy LaCure were also gamers. They were in the theater department. They were also gamers, and they were like, some friends of ours are doing a D&D game. And there's also this group called Geekmasters, which had been formed the year before in 1982 by Daniel Greenberg, Les Brooks, and I believe Sam Shirley and Mike. I am blanking on Mike's last name. But in any case, Geekmasters had a really different view of gaming than what was common at that time, because in the early 1980s, and we're also talking about the beginning era of the Satanic Panic as well, gaming had this really outre reputation as being this thing that scary losers did to summon demons. And in actuality, what it was just this tactical representation of, name character, go kill shit, get treasure. Get treasure, go up levels. And there were some games that were coming out around that time, like Call of Cthulhu and RuneQuest, that were deeper than that. But for the most part, role-playing games were fairly shallow, again, tactical exercises. In Gamesmasters, I met two people who would become incredibly influential to my life, Bill and John Bridges. Bill Bridges, of course, went on to become the Werewolf the Apocalypse developer, was one of the first writers on Vampire. And he and I were also roommates in college. So through Bill and John, I learned about Champions. And Champions was this huge revelation at that time, in which rather than playing the character that you were rolled up, the character class that you had rolled up on your dice, you got to build a character the way you wanted that character to be. Obviously there was room to move, but you weren't a fighter with 12 strength and wisdom of 6, and you see what I mean. And because of the combination of the people, I call it the gang of metaphysical weirdos, because the combination of people in Gamesmasters, we started exploring deeper themes. We started parodying. I think it was Mike who ran a game called Doy and Doy, which was basically a parody of the sky falls, everybody dies, making fun of the tropes in D&D. And in addition to hanging around with this bunch of people who were really into Call of Cthulhu, paranoia, RuneQuest, and Champions, and critiquing what role-playing games were like. We were also, Bill, John, myself, Kathy, Chris, and a few other people, Sue Hayden, and Hillary. I don't remember Hillary's last name. In any case, for those who are listening and who subscribe to the whole, oh my God, girls didn't game before Vampire. No, my gaming groups in college in 1983 going forward were half women or more. The idea that the gaming is just something that dudes do and girls are just there to get boyfriends or whatever was complete crap, and it always has been. Any case, I'm going to put that soapbox away before it gets any taller. But when so we had this contrasting approach here between, we were looking at the possibilities of role playing as expressing yourself, of satirizing socio-political things, of bringing in metaphysical influences. I was also involved in, and have been involved in for most of my life, various metaphysical pursuits, and looking at taking psychology classes. Also, 3 of us were psych majors. I was a theater major, but I was taking psych classes. So we were applying all of these things to the idea of role playing. And then we were playing in this D&D game really, really rote and silly D&D game run by a couple of friends that was kind of highlighting everything that was wrong with D&D. So I gave up on D&D in 84 and just started playing these other, I guess, more quote-unquote sophisticated games, but kept gaming for a while. As I said, Bill and John and I lived together, along with, at one point, Chris, my old gaming buddy from high school. Briefly went to VCU, and he lived with us, and we were making movies, and I was doing stage work and film work and TV work. I was a DJ at one of the local radio stations, college radio station, was playing in bands, and essentially I was becoming making my own urban fantasy character out of my real life. And so that was it was very much a part of my life until I graduated college and found myself needing to actually make a living. And that's where things got a lot less fun, because this was Richmond, Virginia in the mid-1980s, really super high crime rate at that time, and really, really, really shitty jobs with really, really, really shitty pay. There was also some other stuff that's way outside of this conversation, but in any case, I ended up living in a shitty neighborhood in a rapidly decaying marriage, and by around the early 90s, was desperately looking for a way to get out. Now, meanwhile, partly out of that desperation, I had also started writing. My friends John and Lori Roby introduced me to the school computer system, where you could where you could do things like cut and paste and spell check. So I was able to start working around my dyslexia, which was not something I could have done earlier because the technology didn't exist. But because I was able to start writing on the school's computer system, I started writing for one of the local papers, a film review column and then a political opinion column, and wrote a story at one point. With some of the money that I was making, I had decided to take writing a little more seriously. So I started, looking into writings journal, writers market guides and so forth, and seeing the do's and do nots in terms of submitting work professionally. I wrote a story, sent it in to Marion Zimmer Bradley, and she bought it. I wrote a story for a magazine called I want to say The Crucible, but I don't think that's what it was. I don't remember off the top. It's almost 30. This is 30 years ago. Wrote a story for them, and they bought it. Wrote an article for them, and they bought it. Wrote a story for Weird Tales. They didn't buy it, but they were like, "This is really good. You should send us something else." So by the time Bill, by way of Andrew and Dan Greenberg, who again, Dan had founded Gamesmasters, and Andrew Greenberg had been associated with it. Though, as I recall, he didn't go to VCU himself, but he was associated with the group. Andrew, one of the founding members of White Wolf and one of the co-creators of Vampire, and Dan, who was one of the first people writing for Vampire. They're like, "Hey, Bill, want to write for Vampire?" So in 1991, Bill started writing for Vampire, and in 1992, he got hired as the developer for the new game Werewolf, at which point I was like, "Hey, Bill, old gaming buddy, professional." We still knew each other and stuff. It's not like I came out of nowhere, but I was like, professional writer here at Published. So he hired me, and I started writing for Werewolf in 1992. In 93, my life had just become unmanageable. For folks who have seen the introduction comic in Freak Legion, The Player's Guide to Fomori, that was me parodying what my life was like at that point, although thank all the gods that be my now ex-wife and I did not have kids. But the rest of it, the shitty job in the shoe store, the shitty customers, the shitty boss, the decayed marriage, the whole 9 yards, that was all true. And so I was originally supposed to be freelance writing for Mage, but I finally said, "Bill, I want the Mage developer position." He tried to talk me out of it. I was stubborn, and I got it. And so in fall of 1993, I joined the pack myself. During that period, worked on everything White Wolf did except Aberrant, until around by 1998, I was burning out. I was really burning out by about 1997, but I was seriously burned out by 1998. And the company had a long string of catastrophes. My relationship with management had frayed. I was getting very, very tired of putting all my time and creativity into a bunch of things that I didn't own and never would. And the third round of layoffs came around, and I had already submitted my resignation. So basically, they wanted me out, and I wanted out. I continued writing for them freelance for about a year after that, into late '99, early 2000, and then I had a really ugly falling out with the then head of White Wolf, and I just canceled all my contracts. Said, "Fuck this, I'm done," and formed my own company, which we published Goth or Gauche, which was a board game, Plunder, which was a pirate card and board game, Horrific Terror in the Cards, which was a catastrophe, and Deliria Fairy Tales for New Millennium, which was my game in which I took a lot of the things, a lot of the ideas that I'd had either working on White Wolf or things that I wish that I could have done with White Wolf but couldn't because darkness. Deliria was a rebellion against the entire World of Darkness concept, and it sold fairly well. But the company hit some rough points, and I quit that in 2005, and just for a little while was like, I'm done with gaming. I'm done with gaming. I'm done with gaming. I'm done with gaming. But I wasn't. Gaming wasn't done with me. I was doing some freelance work for Pinnacle, and some other companies that I can't even remember off the top of my head, because at that point I was just writing stuff to pay the rent. And meanwhile, Rich Thomas, who was initially the art director and then eventually the creative director at White Wolf, Rich and I had a really contentious relationship during the old days. But I showed up at a party at Gen Con, and I think it was Gen Con 2006, and Rich came up and he bought me a beer, and we started talking. We apologized for what dicks we'd been when we were younger, and he's like, "I miss working with you," and I was like, "I miss working with you." So at that point, I started working with them again. Worked on, as you and I were talking about before the recording started, on the Chronicles of Darkness, Changing Breeds, and then had actually interviewed for possibly being the Vampire the Requiem developer, but they wanted me to move back to Atlanta, and I did not want to move back to Atlanta. By that point, I'd moved to Seattle, and I was very happy here with my then partner, now wife, Sandra Damiana Swan. And we've been together 13 years as of this summer. And then they started working on Werewolf, Werewolf 20th anniversary, and since I was one of the major writers on the Werewolf line, I was involved with that. And initially, while they were working on that, CCP, which was a company that had bought White Wolf in between the time that I had left and 2000, this is like, we're talking about 2010 now, 2010, 2011, CCP abruptly closed their book publishing division and laid everybody off, including Rich Thomas, who had been with White Wolf for longer than White Wolf Game Studio had existed. He originally started with them back when White Wolf was a magazine that the Wick brothers were publishing in their parents' house. So Rich said to CCP, "How about if I form a company, crowdfund a company, so we can put out Werewolf 20th anniversary?" And they're like, "Yeah, fine, just pay us 10%, whatever." The crowdfunding campaign for Werewolf 20th anniversary was a hell of a lot more successful than anybody expected. And so then there was talk about doing Mage 20th anniversary, and I was like, I'm in. So fast forward to the next year, 2012, and I started working on it, and I worked on Mage 20 with On Its Path from 2012 to, I just stepped off last fall because, again, I burned out. The amount of work that goes into these books, especially books the size of the ones that I've been doing for Mage 20, the amount of work involved is enormous, and I found myself getting back on the same treadmill that I'd been involved with that I'd been on with White Wolf in the 90s. Of all of my time and energy goes to doing stuff that I don't own and don't get royalties on. Therefore, I need to step off. I'm continuing to do some things for Mage for the Storyteller's Vault, but I'm now concentrating more on my own work again. So that's kind of a short version of a 30-year story there. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating just to see how you started as basically what a Brucia mixed with a Toreador, and they get inspirations to do more. It's kind of astounding just how you've had this career trajectory, and it comes back to White Wolf-ish, which then I guess became On Its Path, and then working on that, and just up until fairly recently. And it's cool to see you've had a hand in so many of the World of Darkness things, like Changeling the Dreaming, which is yet another game that intimidated the shit out of me because I didn't know anything about it. But Mage, Werewolf, you've done some stuff for like Vampire. You said you've
stuff on Vampire.
Like there's
I,
so many things.
yeah, I had been part of the initial design group for Hunter, but I quit partly because I was getting tired of everything at that point, and partly because the person who was in charge of the initial design group really, really wanted it to be about superhumans, and I thought that it should be more about normal people without powers. And that person, who will remain nameless, said, "But the kids want power. But that's what the kids want, powers. If we want the Goobs to buy it, then we need to put powers in there." And I'm like, everything you just said there is everything that we used to make fun of people for saying. And I wanted no part of that. I would have liked Hunter to have been something different, but so I wasn't a part of that. But other than that, I was part of everything except not Aeon Trinity, because I did actually work on Aberrant between 93 and 2000. I worked on everything other than Hunter. I wasn't involved with Demon. In fact, I was opposed to the idea of doing a role-playing game about demons because of my own metaphysical beliefs. I thought that was a very bad idea. Wasn't involved with that one, but other than that, Vampire, Revelations of Dark Mother, Kindred of the East, Vampire Revised, and Vampire Dark Ages, which is probably that, and Revelations of Dark Mother, two of the things I'm proud of from that era.
When you were working on things with creating the world of darkness, what was it like working with all these different game lines to create this huge overarching meta plot that would eventually culminate in the time of Judgment? Like, because you would leave the company, as far as I understand the timeline, before that book was published, but yeah. I imagine things were in the works for years prior to that, correct?
Ish. The thing is Mark Reinhagen had wanted to end the World of Darkness in 2000, and he was like, we should be building toward this. And as I recall, this was me, Bill, and Andrew. I'm not even sure if Jennifer was with the company. I think Jennifer was with the company, but I'm not sure. Me, Bill, Andrew, and Ken Cliff, who was the head of editing and developing, are like, "Are you out of your fucking mind?" and he's like, "But we've set up this thing and we have to pay it off. So in 2000, we'll just end the World of Darkness." We're like, "Do you want the company to go out of business?" And we definitely knew that White Wolf needed to do other things. And of course, we had Osmagica, although that was sold to Blizzards of the Coast in '94. But we also did the brief but gloriously gaudy Street Fighter RPG,
which I have.
It was fun. My God, it was so. That was, of all the things I worked on with White Wolf, that one was one of the most fun. Because not everybody, a lot of people in the offices were really into Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, and so when the opportunity to do a licensed tie-in with that, with Street Fighter came up, we're like, oh hell yeah! It didn't go over very well commercially, but one of the criticisms that a lot of people had was, why doesn't White Wolf do its own like World of Darkness superheroes? And Rob Hatch ran with that idea, and the result was Aberrant. But we were also had the whole Trinity, Aeon/Trinity. Thank you, Viacom, and fuck you too. Yeah, it was originally supposed to be called Aeon, and Viacom hit us with a cease and desist, claiming that people would think that we were saying that it was an Aeon Flux RPG. So we had to change the name stickers over the books, because the book had already gone to press at that point. We would have won if it had gone to court, but of course, as anybody who's worked in the entertainment industry knows, it's not about whether or not you're right. It's whether or not it's about who has the most money to throw at lawyers while outspending their opponent. And they had a lot more lawyers than we did, and a lot more money than we did, especially at that point. But in any case, the process of putting it all together was fucking insane, because basically we were putting out between 92 and around 98, I think it was, we were putting out 10 books per line per year.
Oh, wow.
Right. That's totally fucking insane, especially when you consider how big some of those books were. And most of us were freelancing on other people's. I mean, I was freelancing on, Werewolf, Changeling, briefly Wraith, Vampire, Dark Ages, and Aberrant, and pretty much almost everybody who was writing for one was writing for the others as well. But we also had a large freelance pool, and we were just all pushing so hard. It was crunch time 24/7 for 6 years or so, and which is why so many of us wound up burning out by the end of the 90s, and either quitting, getting fired, having breakdowns, etc., etc. And so we were in the early days when it was me, Bill, and Andrew, and Jennifer, and later Ian. What we would do is we would just literally go into each other's office and go, "Hey, I was thinking about this thing," and especially because Bill and Andrew and I had already known each other since the early '80s, that was easy. We had a few people who were part of our in-house brain trust: Rob Hatch, Brian Campbell, Cynthia Summers, Rich Dansky. Once he got involved, I think he joined in '95. Dansky was with us in '95 or early '96. Ian Lemke, Mike Tinney, Sam Chupp, Travis Williams, Kathleen Ryan. We're all kind of this constant perpetual creation machine. And because we would be working in the office 10, 12, 14, sometimes 16, occasionally 24-hour days, we would just go over to one another's office and go, "Hey, I had this idea. What do you think?" That's where a lot of it came from. Most of it was because of the amount of stuff we were producing and the short period of time involved in it. A lot of it was just pure improvisation. There was no real master plan. We were making shit up as we went along. That's one of the. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, one of the things that you mentioned in there is you were right. You guys were producing so many books, so many source books, splat books, fiction, and other tie-ins for the various lines. It was honestly one of the most exciting times to be a gamer involved in the World of Darkness. The only other line I could think of or game that was even close to this would have been maybe FOSSA when they were doing Shadowrun stuff. And even then they ran out of stuff with you guys because you had so many game lines, but everything interconnected. I mean, I guess to give some of my listeners a little bit of context, think of this as kind of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but with teeth and fangs.
Punks and Sisters of Mercy soundtrack.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretensions.
It was something so exciting and different. I just remember it was all building towards some things, but not every game line had the same feel. Vampire could potentially be very sad in terms of how you wanted to tell its storyline. As you mentioned, there were themes kind of baked into it and whatnot. Werewolf, I always felt, was environmentally based, but also had a spiritual bent to it too, dealing with the Umbra, I think it was called, stuff like that, and the Weaver and the Worm. And I'd never seen representation in a book tackled specifically for First Nations before, and I was really attracted to that as a young gamer, thinking, man, I'd never seen part of my spiritual beliefs or spiritual background ever in a game that wasn't treated as something kind of silly. This was intense. And then the other thing, like you said, you weren't attracted, or you were only involved in the initial stuff for Hunter. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was cool that humans had powers. But I thought their angle was as a response to the World of Darkness, and that even at times they would fight other supernatural creatures. Likely they'd get their asses kicked because, let's face it, hunters have nowhere near the powers that they should, or not should. They were underpowered compared to everything else. But I always thought it was neat how the World of Darkness had checks and balances, whereas if you went up against a fully empowered werewolf, good luck to you.
You're confetti.
Yeah, pretty much. You're meat paste. But if you go up against a fully powerful mage, he can take you apart at the subatomic level. So there were
without even being anywhere near you.
Yeah, there was just something about a game that was balanced yet unbalanced, and it didn't care because it didn't need to. And there were so many different flavors that if you wanted to be a ghost or a specter, there was that option too with Wraith the Oblivion. Storytelling to me at that time had always just been D&D or urban fantasy adjacent with like Shadowrun. It wasn't until later I would discover things like Battletech and Star Wars, but World of Darkness was something unlike anything I'd ever seen before because it was a satire, it was a dark mirror of what reality was at that time. So I guess my like next question is, when you were working on Mage, what did you want to accomplish with that line? Because like I said, I'm not super familiar with it, but I would love for you to pitch to me, what is Mage inside of a nutshell? Because at its core, I see two very different opposing views. As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I would really love for you to do that, there's the science of how things work and magic, which is how you view, I think it's your paradigm, I think it is how you understand things work. And then there's the order of reason and the technocracy, who says human genius, science, and hard and proven facts, this is just how things work. And the consensus, which is how everybody generally accepts it, like you, me, the guy down the street. A car works because of a combustion engine. It works by burning fuel, by accomplishing XYZ. That just is how it is. But if you see a car fly, your brain can't process that, and reality says, no, you're not doing that, and something bad happens to you. Correct?
That's close.
Okay.
At its core, Mage is about empowerment. And it's about how it's about how reality is more subjective than we think it is, but that we're all in this together. So even though we have disagreements over things, sometimes really major disagreements, that there is a human kind of a human consensus, not necessarily even just human consensus, that holds this crazy creation together. The peril of realizing how powerful you really are, though, and how powerful you actually can be, is that your actions affect the rest of the world. The rest of the world affects you in return. So what you essentially have in Mage is a bunch of people who can literally change reality because they believe strongly enough that they can, but they disagree on how it should be changed and what reality should look like. The division between the traditions and the technocracy, it's not really, it's only a difference between science versus magic on the surface. Ultimately, what it is self-determination, the traditions versus external control, the technocracy. The traditions, the Council of Nine Traditions, essentially is 9 very, very different, very contentious groups united around the ideal that people should be able to be empowered to make their world as they will, with the paradox that they think that the traditions think it should be done this way. Meanwhile, the technocracy, which grew out of the order of reason, is a group that says reality is too dangerous to be left to amateurs. We'll take care of that. Meanwhile, there are other factions as well. There's the Nefandi, who essentially say creation's fucked, let's just kill it, and the Disparate Alliance, who are essentially like, hi, we have these we have these cultural identities. You all keep running over us. Would you please fucking stop? We're trying to survive here. Leave us alone, or else. And then there are the marauders who are just like, reality is what I make it, and what I make it is everything. And the most dangerous thing about those folks is they're so wrapped up in their view of reality that it warps the reality of everybody around them. The paradox in that, of course, is that all mages are marauders to some extent. All mages are dangerous to some extent. In Mage 20th anniversary, I say that mages are both heroes and monsters. They're heroes regardless of their faction, because they are those people who stand up and move the world in a particular direction in some dramatic way, because they believe that, and they believe and they know they have the power to do so. And they're monsters because they usually fuck things up when they do, because they get so wrapped up in their power that they forget that the things they do affect other people, and that those effects might not necessarily be good. So on one hand, Mage is the optimistic game because it's about empowerment. Where Vampire is about hanging on to the last shreds of your humanity, where Werewolf is about fighting a losing battle for an Earth that's being poisoned by decay, where Changeling is about eventually losing track of your inner magic and having the world trying to stamp it out, so you have to hide it. And Wraith is about the being trapped with being trapped, mourning the life that you used to have, and being shut out from life but being unable to move on. Hunter is about being besieged by this crazy ass world and fighting back against it. Mage is about realizing you have the power, that you have the power of gods. And with the flip side being, and that's dangerous. You should be careful with that. And by the way, you're not the only one who has that power, and other people who have it might not necessarily agree with you about what the world should look like.
Did you find it difficult when things were in their prime to make Mage work with the other worlds of darkness? Because as you just said, empowerment is very much a light and positive thing. But as you just said, you're a monster because you do wield the power of essentially Thanos and the Infinity Gauntlet. Mm-hmm. And how do you balance that against all the other games? Because their themes are so remarkably different, as you mentioned. It's just, I've never seen a game system or a world and lore that, in my opinion, just works. Like, how did everything just, this is the peanut butter and jelly, the peanut butter and chocolate. How did everything just work so well together?
It was a lot of us were just coming from the same place. As I said, some of us literally came from the same place. Bill, Andrew, Daniel, myself, and again, some of the people that we brought in from VCU as freelancers: Sam Abenett, Chris Howard, John Roby. I think Les Brooks might have worked on some of the some stuff for Werewolf or Vampire as well. The things that we brought into the world of darkness were things we were talking about at Geekmasters 10 years earlier. And we were like, back then when we were kids in college, we were like, wouldn't it be cool if, well, in the 90s, between White Wolf and Chaosium, we got to be in charge of the candy store. So we brought these ideas that we'd been talking about back then into it, and it just happened to be that there were a number of other people, again, Mark Reinhagen, Stephen Stewart Wick, Kathy Ryan, Sam Chupp, Travis Williams, Nicole Andrews, who were all on the same page, even though we hadn't been having the same conversation. They were saying a lot of the same things. So when we got together, one of the most brilliant, it was definitely contentious, in application, but it was probably the single most brilliant thing, other than creating the World of Darkness itself, that Mark and Stuart and Steve did, was that when they hired us to be the line developer, they gave the line completely over to the vision of the person in charge. As far as I'm aware, no other gaming company had done that, and so as a result, the person who was the line developer for particular series, the books that they did and still do at this point, although that system's broken down a bit through 30 years, the line reflected the person who was in charge, and so the early days of Vampire are very, very much a reflection of Andrew Greenberg and where Andrew Greenberg was coming from at that time. Werewolf is very much a reflection of Bill Bridges and later of Ethan Skemp after Bill left to form Holistic Design. Mage is very, very strongly identified with me. so much so that the other developers have had a hard time at times, either being in my shadow or trying to bring their own vision to the game. And unfortunately, they were also handicapped by White Wolf at that point, not wanting them to be as hands-on as I was. Wraith, Vampire, Werewolf, and Mage were all created before the line developer was hired. Andrew was involved in the early design of Vampire, but the idea of having a person in charge of Vampire didn't come about until after Vampire actually existed as a line. At which point, it was like, Andrew, can you take care of this? The result is Chicago by Night, the first edition Chicago by Night, which, in my opinion, is one of the landmark gaming source books, because that was sort of Andrew's manifesto and vision for what Vampire would become, and it's absolutely brilliant. Dated, of course, it came out in 1992, but there were very few RPG source books that presented as coherent a mission statement for a game line as Chicago by Night did. And Bill was hired after Werewolf was written, which Werewolf was largely written in about 4 weeks by Rob Hatch and Sam Chupp, based on lots of discussions and arguments with Mark. And then Bill was brought in and basically told, here, you make this work. When I was hired for Mage was initially created by Stuart and Steve with Chris Early. They had brainstormed up something that was really wildly ambitious and radical, thematically radical, but the pieces didn't quite fit. So they stripped it down, rewrote it in 3 weeks, I think it was, with pretty much everybody in White Wolf at that time on the White Wolf staff chipping in to write parts of it. And then they sent it to me for, if you were going to be the line developer, what would you do with this? I sent them back a 28-page. I would do this. They hired me, and when Ken Cliff and I met, met for my official, okay, here it is. You are now the Mage developer guy. He handed me the first copy of the book to come back from press, and I said, so how much creative freedom do I have with this? And he said, it's all yours. We don't have the slightest idea what to do with it. That system got contentious when Jennifer came on board, because Bill, Andrew, and I said, why don't we hire the developer before the game book is written, so there's not a matter of trying to play catch up, because as there had been with Vampire, Werewolf, and Mage. That worked better in theory than in practice, in part because we hadn't actually had an outside person involved in the creative process, and that way before. It's like, Andrew had been part of the group, and Bill had been part of the group, and I'd been part of the group before we became the guy. And also, that was the other problem. We were the guys. Jennifer is not. And White Wolf, which on many levels was a remarkably progressive company for the 90s and was all about, as you said earlier, representation, discovered the hard way that although we had about half our staff was women, that there were certain people, they'll remain nameless on that, but there were certain people in the company that were perfectly okay working with a woman writer, but they were not okay with being told what to do by that woman writer. And so Jennifer encountered a lot of resistance to her ideas. And because Jennifer was not someone who had worked with White Wolf until she was hired as a developer, there was a lot of, this is the way we do things around here. And Mark had some very strong ideas about what Wraith should be, and Jennifer had very strong ideas about what Wraith should be. And what Wraith ended up as was kind of a very awkward compromise between the two. Also, I'll be blunt, Mark was disappearing up his own ass at that point, and a lot of his ideas for Wraith were really terrible. And Jennifer had to fight him on a daily basis of, no, Mark, that's a bad idea. You can't do that. Well, it's my company. I can do that. Mark, that's a bad idea. And so that was definitely part of the process as well. Mark recognized after Wraith came out that he had disappeared up his own ass, and so Changeling was on many levels an effort to compensate for going too grimdark even by our standards, and so Changeling had its own issues, not the least of which was caused by distributors who insisted that it had to have a collectible card game component or they wouldn't stock it, because collectible card games were the thing in 1994, 95. But even then, Ian had been part of the White Wolf staff for over a year before he was hired as the Changeling line developer. So Jennifer really ended up in a difficult position as being A, the first female line developer with the company, and B, being the first line developer and the last for a while line developer who hadn't already been part of the company when they became that, when they got that position. So the initial design and creation of the games was always a very fraught process. Fortunately, all of us liked each other, all of us being the creators. We all liked each other and respected each other, even if we didn't get along particularly well at a given time. If I went into, Rich's office or Bill's office and said I had this idea, or if one of them came into my office and said I had this idea, we would listen to each other. And we definitely had a lot of creative tension and creative interplay in those first few years, and very much a reflection of the people who were doing it. And in the case of Mage, while I definitely took a very strong hand in the work with it, I am also not. Disappearing up your own ass is kind of anathema to me. I am the anti-George Lucas, and I make a point of always surrounding myself with and working with people who will tell me when I'm disappearing up my own ass, and or can help me work out, like, I have this problem. How should we work this out? And then I have this core of people, again, Kathleen Ryan, Sam Chupp, Bill Bridges, Brian Campbell, Rob Hatch, Vicky Ray and Jackie Cassada, who were freelancers but who lived nearby, so they spent a lot of time at the offices anyway. Judy McLaughlin, who was a gamer, member of my gaming group back in Richmond before I started with White Wolf. And I would work with Owl Going Back, who was not writing game material, but he was frequently in the office working on fiction. And so I brainstormed with them, Jim Moore also, and a number of other people, Sam and Abbott, a friend. Richmond. We would like sit down and just hash this stuff out. This is an important thing also for context, but for people who are looking at these books now, 25, 30 years later. There was no social media. The internet barely existed. There was no teleconferencing or having, things like what we're doing now. You either talked to somebody on the phone for hours, or you sat in your office with them and you talked. There were bulletin boards. You could go online and chat with people on Alt Games, White Wolf, or something like that. But even then, it wasn't in real time, and very few people had computers or an internet connection. Internet was still dial-up until about 2000, and so this was all very, like, sometimes literally hands-on. We were doing this in person or over the phone for long periods of time, and so there are definitely elements of the World of Darkness that have not aged well, but that was largely a function of we were working with the people we knew and the people we could reach out to and go, hey, how do we do this? And rely on those people to be there when we needed them.
So one thing I'd like to know, because you have had such a strong hand in Mage for so long, over 30 years, what would you
28
say?
years, but yeah.
What would you say is the book or experience working through this that transformed you the most personally? Maybe something, as you've mentioned metaphysical and spiritual beliefs a few times. Is there anything in your work that maybe transformed you on a level you didn't necessarily expect?
Well, all of it to a degree. I said it's hard to put that onto a single book, because all of the projects, it was a process, especially when you consider, again, that I was putting those out almost a book a month for 5 years. The process bled from one book into another. I often, back in the old days, compared working on Mage to having a gigantic canvas and painting it apart here and apart here and apart here and apart here, and constantly trying to keep a vision in my mind of what the canvas should look like, but only being able to do a bit here and a bit here and a bit here and a bit here, and hope all the pieces would fit together eventually. Probably the single most transformative one would have been either the Book of Chantries, which was the first Mage book I worked on, just because so much of my vision for Mage appeared first in that book. The Book of Shadows, which I often call Mage 1.5, because that's where I took a lot of the either ideas or rule fixes that I've been working on and put them into a book where people could pick it up and go, oh, okay, this, instead of seeding it out through other books, which I've been doing as I refine those ideas with my team up until that point, or Mage 20, because Mage 20 was my return. As I mentioned earlier, I left White Wolf on really bad terms on both levels. I was angry at them, they were angry at me, and I had ditched most of my collection and literally changed my name so as not to be associated with White Wolf for years. I didn't talk about my relationship with White Wolf. I did not want to be that guy who used to be the Mage guy, and I had a lot of hard feelings about White Wolf and Mage until Rich and I started talking again in 2006, and until my friend and frequent collaborator Brian Syme ran a Mage game with me in 2009. I think it was 2008 or 2000. We met in 2000. We met in 2008, so I think it was around 2009 when he ran a Mage Sorcerer's Crusade game, and I started remembering why I left Mage. Up until that point, I literally didn't even look at the books for about 10 years. But in 2011, in 2010, by way of Facebook, talk about social media, some folks got in touch with me from Greece, and I've met and talked to fans of Mage, over the years, and that's always been awesome. But this went to a whole other level. one of them, Adonis Galatis. Adonis was like, I love your work. I kind of grew up on it, and can I talk to you on Facebook? And I was like, yeah, sure, cool. Hi, nice to meet you. And he quickly virtually introduced me to his friend Haris, to his sister Nina, to his friends Joanna, his girlfriend Maria, and so forth. And Nina had said, if you ever find your way out, if you ever find yourself in Athens, we would gladly host you. And I'm like, I would love to come to Athens, but I'm a writer and broke. I can't afford it. Thank you, though. So Haris, a few weeks later, says, so Adonis' name day is coming up, and we'd like to know if we could fly you out here to meet Adonis. I was like, I want to make absolutely sure that I'm not making a cultural or linguistic mistranslation here. Are you asking if you can fly? Are you offering to fly me and my partner out to Greece? And he says yes. I'm like, hell yes.
Wow.
So in early 2011, Sandy and I went out there. And that experience was a revelation on a lot of levels, in part because these people are just awesome. They're wonderful people. They're some of our best friends. And partly because for the first time, I'd seen little bits and pieces of it. But for the first time, I started seeing the long tail legacy of what we've done. I was meeting with people who've been, teenagers when they started reading our books. And, like you were saying, it was a revelation to them. And then now they're adults and they're amazing human beings. And they took ideas that they had found in Mage, and they used them to empower themselves in real life. And I was like, wow. And theoretically, this was cool. And I've heard people say this before, but oh my fucking God. That was huge. So when I came back, I wrote a social media post to the various people, including Stephen Stewart, who I hadn't talked to since 1999. And I was just like, I know we've had our issues before, but we've done good. Let me tell you about this group of people and what we created here and how much that's changed people's lives. That allowed Stephen Stewart and I to reconnect and to kind of rebuild the bridges that we burnt in 98 and 99, and apologize for the kids that we had been, and get to know each other as the adults we became. And that all came together when I started doing Mage 20, which is started working on in 2012. Rich Thomas, when he and I had our first meeting about it, he said, I really miss the magic. He said, I really want to bring that sense of energy that we had in the office in the old days. He said, I miss that. I want to bring the magic back. I was like, so do I. So Mage 20 was all about taking all of the stuff that had happened back then, that had happened since, the experiences that I'd had, since leaving White Wolf, things that had become clear only, later with greater experience, and so forth, bringing back some of the old team, and also rereading, in some cases, in the case of the revised books, reading for the first time, almost 100 Mage books, and trying to culminate it all. I got together a brain trust of several dozen people, some of the folks from Greece, some friends and fans from Brazil, from Germany, from literally all over the world, Japan, and going, okay, how do we bring the magic back? And Mage 20 Mage 20 was an epic piece of work. The final version is 700 pages long. That was after I cut 1.5 million words out of it.
Oh, wow.
And that was kind of my bring everything good about the old days, as well as bringing it forward and making it new. I said I wanted to create, Rich and I both said we wanted to create a Mage for all Mage fans. And because of the schism when when Revised was done. That was Revised being the final break, my final breaking point with Stephen Stewart, because they told Jess, who, Jess and I are friends, and he was my handpicked successor. They told Jess, "You're going to do it. You're going to do it this way. You're going to do what we tell you, or we'll find somebody else who will." And I was very angry at them for putting Jess in that position. And so, because Revised was largely created by a committee instead of by a person's vision, either Jess's or mine, it did not hang together particularly well, and it created a major schism in the fan base between the people who really, really loved the Revised edition and people who really loved what had gone before the Revised edition. What Rich and I wanted to do was heal that breach and make it a Mage for all Mage fans. So that was part of, I guess, Mage 20 was a culmination, a statement of intent, a celebration, and a reconciliation. So I guess maybe after I've gone through that long dissertation, of all of the books of their Mage 20, it's probably it. Although Sorcerer's Crusade's also pretty fucking good, but that's a whole other story.
I gotta say, it's amazing to hear your stories, just to see how much you have changed, to see how it's cool to see how you got involved with people who were fans and really did that for you. And I know Mage, speaking from personal experience, transformed that friend who brought us together, because they really, really loved the world that was created. They loved the vision that was created. And I haven't seen that much passion come from a person involving a property in a very, very, very long time. So I'm really glad that they were able to connect this. I understand, though, as we begin to finish this interview, there's more on the horizon in the next little bit.
Yeah. So the coming out probably by the time this interview is broadcast, the Kickstarter campaign for Technocracy Reloaded will be launched. And the Technocracy, as we've mentioned a little while ago, it was initially presented as the grand soulless monolith of stasis and control, and we hate you, and all of this. And eventually, part of the ongoing creative process that I've referred to earlier, we had humanized the Technocracy, which I will point out, humanize does not necessarily mean make nice, but made more understandable and made more reasonable than just soulless monolith, beep beep, Terminator die. And with Technocracy Reloaded, because the Technocracy was created in 1993, for that sake. And with Technocracy Reloaded, myself, Travis Legg, who was my co-developer on it, and the authors, Danielle Hiromi, Brian Campbell, who's been involved with Mage from the beginning, we said, okay, what does the Technocracy look like now? 20 going here into 2020 in a fundamentally irrational age, which is anathema to everything the Technocracy stands for. What is the Technocracy like now? One of the ideas thrown around in Revised that I disagreed with was, well, Technocracy won because cell phones. It was like, Technocracy is not about cell phones. The Technocracy is about control. And if you look at the world around us, what control? The introduction, which I wrote for the book, starts out with that. Yeah, you've heard we're winning. Does it look like we're winning? And it's about this group dedicated to saving the world and saving humanity from themselves, being faced with the humanity in a world that maybe doesn't want to be saved. And go ahead.
I was about to say, this sounds like something really cool, and man, yeah, I'm really excited to see how this how this like Kickstarter goes. Now, how long is the Kickstarter expected to last? About the usual month or so? Or
Yeah, I think it's the usual month. I don't know because listen, I in at the end of last year, I had a number of personal tragedies, which I'm not going to go into, but I had a number of personal tragedies over the last 3 years, and that combined with the growing toxicity on the net, the just vile social political situation, and the sheer size of the books that we've been doing. In fact, I'm 55 years old. Whatever does or doesn't happen with coronavirus, I'm going to be lucky if I have another 20 years. I've been doing Mage for almost 30 years. I've been writing professionally for 30 years as of last year. I don't have 30 years of doing this left in me. So I have to be more careful about what I do and where I put my time. So again, I said, I love y'all. I love Mage. I can't do this anymore. In last fall, that's when Travis and I co-developed that book. And Victorian Mage, and honestly, I have no idea who's even doing that anymore. I have no idea what's happening with it. I finished my section on it ages ago. But I am continuing to do work in the Storyteller's Vault, which is basically fan or pro created content that is unofficial. And I have 7 Storyteller Guide books in various different stages, either mostly made up of material that I had cut or had envisioned and then not gone forward with for Mage 20. The book that I'm just finishing up this week actually is Mage Made Easy, which you mentioned earlier. Mage is this gargantuan, intimidating, oh my fucking god, how do I even start? Mage Made Easy is, okay, so how do you take that 700-page book and introduce it to new players? And basically my suggestions, it's sort of my, as the Book of Secrets was, or rather the Book of Shadows, rather, not Book of Secrets, as the Book of Shadows was sort of Mage 1.5, Mage Made Easy is sort of Mage 4.5. It's not an introduction to Mage. That would be the Mage Quick Start, which we did for the Mage 20 Quick Start, which we did back in 2013, and which is available for free on DriveThruRPG in PDF form. But Mage Made Easy is how do you wrangle, or suggestions for wrangling the 700-page beast into something that you can start new players in and have a fun game without having to understand the meta plot and the complicated rules. It doesn't change the rules, though it presents a few suggestions for simplifying some of them. And it doesn't add anything to the meta plot. In fact, it's all about stripping the meta plot out and how to work without the meta plot. But it's kind of my next step in getting people engaged with Mage, because this is a period where people really need to know that we still have power, because we're surrounded by parties that are stripping away as much of our power, literally our lives, at this moment, taking those things away from us so that they can have more power and we can have nothing. So I think that Mage is more relevant than ever on a lot of levels. I'm just trying to make it more accessible. I have some other books that may or may not come out depending on how things go, because I'm also working on my own stuff. And that was the most important thing, as I realized, with the few years that I have left, however many years that is, I need to do things. I need to do things that I own, where I'm not constrained by the expectations of 30 years worth of meta plot and canon and so forth, and where I don't have rights holders telling me what I can and can't do. Although, in fairness, very, very few people have ever told me I can't do something with Mage. Usually they just keep their hands up and go, whatever the fuck, dude. It's all yours. We don't know what to do with it.
Well, so, I gotta say, I'm looking forward to seeing whatever you create next. I know Mage is something I'm very much going to take an active interest in, especially with that Mage Made Easy book that you're talking about. I know Onyx Path offered Mage 20th for free during the COVID-19 crisis. If I remember correctly, they offered a lot of free books.
Yeah, it was free for a week. The PDF was free for a week, yeah.
So hopefully you folks out there in Twig will be taking a look for this. So once again, that Kickstarter is running right now as of this, or when this recording airs. So please check out Technocracy Reloaded. Phil, thank you for coming on Twig and just sharing all your insights and stories with us. It's been a fascinating interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for everybody who's listening. And thank you, Chris, for doing this. I really appreciate it.
All right, guys, that was my interview with Phil Satyros, Brucato. So please check out his stuff on DriveThru RPG. If you want to buy, if you want to check into the Kickstarter, just go to Kickstarter.com, type in Technocracy Reloaded. You should be able to find it right there. Please consider supporting this project. And I think Mages is a really cool name. So big thanks to Darla for putting us in touch for this interview. Hopefully we will be talking more World of Darkness in the future here, as I have more questions about all this, because I still love the old World of Darkness. So guys, until next time, I have been Mike the Birdman Dodd for ThisWeekInGeek.net, and to quote my friend Jackie Bam Bam, I'm going to say, be cool, be kind, be careful. We'll catch you guys again next time, right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
Well, that's our show. All right, here's the deal. Every time you watch my show, I will send you $40.
Checks will not be honored.
You've been listening to This Week in Geek, your source for guaranteed nonsense or your money back. Tune in next week for more info on the most important things you didn't need to know. Check out our website at ThisWeekInGeek.net and subscribe to our podcast through iTunes or any podcatcher. If you'd like to comment on this episode, head over to this episode's post at ThisWeekInGeek.net and leave a comment through Facebook Connect. Follow us on Twitter at ThisWeekInGeek.net and follow our Instagram at twig_official_podcast. Social media not your thing? Send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. We'll see you next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
Just when you think this show is terrible, something wonderful happens.
What?
It ends.
I have to go. Somewhere there is a crime happening.